Welcome, everyone, joining us for another episode of the PvP podcast. Crayola here today with a very interesting guest on the 26th episode of the PvP podcast. On a lovely morning for me, and for him, it's the middle of the night. Here we have with us Vallun.
Yeah, it is definitely pretty late. I would consider myself nocturnal though, so it's all good for me.
So, your sleep schedule, you sleep in the middle of the day.
Well, I sleep normal times, but I had a lot of experience back in the day in college, and I would just be writing all night, doing papers at night. It's just the best time, like to get something done because no one's gonna bother you, right?
Right. I tried to do that a lot when I was in school, but every time I try it, I'd fall asleep in the middle of it.
Yeah, you usually have that happen, that's for sure. But you get it done eventually.
Yeah. Right, so we're gonna go into a couple of topics here with Valen, and the first one is definitely build crafting, because, well, for those in the not know, Valen is at this point a giant content creator on YouTube, uh, with great videos on all sorts of builds, how to counter current meta builds, essentially a lot of videos about discussion as well. Like I don't even know the titles of a lot that I've listened to because I've just let them on, roll in the background and let you talk sometimes. You get some really interesting points regarding many of those. So I'd really love to pick your brain and hear what you have to say on build crafting in general. But to start with, how do you actually approach crafting a build? I've never crafted a build.
Um, Crafting a build is sort of like an invention. You you don't craft a build because you're like, "Oh, I just want to craft a build right now." You craft a build, well, that's what I do. I kind of do that at this point now. I do it for fun. But for the average player, they're going to be crafting a build to solve a problem, right? That's what an invention is. If you're a coder of some sort, right? Or like a game developer maybe, you would create some sort of like mechanic in games. So like say you want to make a Ferris wheel effect or whatever, right? So then you have to code some sort of like circular motion, right?
Mhm.
You create that circular motion to solve the problem of being able to create the Ferris wheel. You don't create the it's sort of like that order of you have a problem and then you need to solve that problem. So you create the build to solve that problem. So if I'm like dealing with meta, right? So
Mhm.
maybe Minion Master, is the problem right now. So you think, okay, so how do I go about solving the problem, right? You create a build to either counter like a meta build, or you can also create a build to just kind of like serve another purpose, right? Whereas like I want to play staff elementalist because I like staff elementalist. So how do I make a staff elementalist build that's going to work, right? So there's like the issue of solving the meta, and then there's like the issue of like a personal problem, right? So it's always about the kind of like the having a purpose, right? That's the core of creating a build.
Right. Well, for me, it was a really tough time figuring out. Like, I always played Engie, and for a big part, especially in Heart of Thorns, I played Pistol, Burn Engie, or even Path of Fire. And it was a really big problem for me figuring out exactly what I need to shift around as the meta changed. I would be on one amulet that gives me let's say I would be on Rabbit or something, and I'd need to shift to, I don't know, Wizards for Vitality if I was fighting con damage, but I wouldn't know. So how do like there's a lot that goes into considering even when you do know the builds that you're trying to counter craft against. How do you actually go approaching the crafting to that specific table?
Yeah, it kind of has a lot to do with just knowing everything. It's like, well, I know that this exists, and therefore I need to make up for that in this way. And honestly, for me, it's kind of like having a collection of like Pokemon cards, right? Or something like that,
Right.
where I create all these builds and each build gives me like an idea, right? Like, so if I make let's take for example, Fresh Air Tempest, and maybe that build isn't amazing. I like it a lot, but maybe it's not amazing at the current moment, but later it might be good. So I have that idea in kind of like in my pocket, right? Like I have that Pokemon card that I can take out and I can use it when I need it. So like that idea, I can just kind of like implement it, like that package of fresh air plus overload air is kind of like a pretty cool synergy. So whenever I want to like employ that, that's something I can use. So maybe if like at one point sometime like I don't know, maybe elementalist becomes very powerful for whatever reason due to balance, and then there's a build that I can kind of create where I can put that package in there. It's very convenient, and it's like in the back of my head, so it's like I don't really have to come up with it completely on the spot because I've already got like this whole deck of cards ready to just like put in there to solve a problem. It's like, oh, there's a fire type Pokemon. Well, I got a water right here.
Yeah. Well, you take it like really crafting, like knowing kind of the whole dynamic of the game to that extent. Like I played a lot of Fresh Air Alley actually back in the day as well, core days. Nowadays, I personally deem it unviable. But
Yeah, I would agree.
how would you make it viable?
Fresh. You want fresh air
Scepter.
Weaver?
Scepter focus. I love core. I loved core, but I guess Weaver would be the way to go right now, right? Or
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I did make a World v World version of Fresh Air Weaver, and it used the water trait line. I know this is kind of like taboo. Like Fresh Air, I got attacked by the Fresh Air Weaver community for doing this, right? Because there's also like this sort of maybe this is another topic. There's like this sort of elitism around builds. Like if you even on Mesmer players, right? They can get pretty mad if you are running their class and you're running like an easier to play version of that class.
for
So
sure.
like if you're using the chaos trait line on Mesmer, a lot of people deem that as like sort of like shameful.
Yeah,
And for Fresh Air Weaver, that's the water trait line, because there is like this really good synergy with the cleansing water trait and woven stride. And yeah, while that does kind of neuter your damage as Fresh Air Ellie, and it kind of like ruins the purpose of even running Fresh Air Ellie, it does solve a lot of problems that Fresh Air Ellie has, like lacking sustain because you have a lot of regen if you take that kind of like fresh air water plus woven stride combo, and it also gives you your Condi cleanse, which I mean, if a Condi thief just looks at you as a fresh air Ellie, you kind of just you get sneezed on and you die, right?
pretty
So
much. Yeah.
yeah, so my solution, and I made a video on this as well. My solution was that when you're in world v world roaming, and this is also kind of like another aspect of build crafting too, is the situation you're in. So world v world roaming, you have the problem of, okay, so I'm roaming, so I'm going to be in a lot of situations, so I'm going to need mobility, I'm going to need my own Condi cleanse and sustain, and I'm going to need burst damage. Well, I'm going to have to sacrifice a little bit of my burst damage then as a fresh air Ellie if I want to get those other two things that are probably just as important as burst damage. So a fresh air Ellie or Weaver is probably, it's not going to feel as good as water in some situations, but it's going to feel better in those situations where you kind of like lose, right? So it's, my solution is to lose some of the role or like the win more aspect, like when you're in a situation where you are already winning as fresh air Ellie, then you delete the enemy. But in those situations where you're gonna die, well, you die so fast that you probably don't even remember that you died, right?
High risk, high reward, right?
Yeah. But see, that's another thing. Like I don't think that high risk is necessarily more skillful. I there's this idea of if your build is very like low sustain, therefore your build is like high skill. I don't really see that because it just makes the fights kind of feel like a heads or tails coin flip, right? You either one shot the enemy or you fail and then they just kill you, right? So sustained fights are usually showing more interactivity and how to play around resources, and I think it's a little bit more interactive. So you'll see that in my builds that they generally like to have more sustain.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a big aspect now that okay, so after Heart of Thorns, ArenaNet shifted the direction of the game, going with the healer as well, right? So there is that aspect of the game. So I completely understand where you need some sort of self sustain. Like if we're talking about Fresher Alley, especially where you're basically bursting. Like even let's say burst Mesmer, Great Sword Mesmer, isn't the best thing now in PvP to play, even though it has this amazing disengage potential with the stealth and portal and blink and whatever. It's not enough to keep it. It can't get kills fast enough, let's say, to be to not be bursted down too fast, right?
Yeah, I would say Great Sword Barrage is very good, but it needs support to to be able to do its stuff, right? And if you're getting supported as a Mesmer, then in solo queue you got to be duoing with the support. You can't really rely on someone to support you, right?
Mm.
So, in a way, like Mesmer is the lowest sustain class, but it needs to be because it's so powerful. Um, if it didn't have like the lowest sustain as a Mesmer, it would be a balance issue. So I think right now Mesmer is probably considered the worst class right now because it has such little sustain. So I could see it definitely being buffed a little bit, but it still needs to have like retain that identity of having low sustain so that you have to play around rotations more. Thief and Mesmer are supposed to be more rotationally based, not staying in fights for long. So I would say, yeah. I mean, the great sword is really good and stuff like that, but um, yeah, I don't know where I was going with this.
I actually want to ask you right here if we can stray just a little bit. What do you think of the current Mesmer situation? Like, you have a lot of Mesmer mains, sort of like Helseth and these guys, saying that Mesmer needs a heal buff, right? Sustained heal buff. While you have other Mesmer mains, like my friend Jazz says Mesmer should not get a heal buff. It's got enough sustain. They should get the second dodge back. Where are you on that wagon?
Um, I'm inclined to believe that one dodge is still too many because if you understand the Mesmer mechanics, there's quite a bit more evasion there still. So um, the whole getting your second dodge back, I don't know if that is going to happen, but that could definitely be an answer because um, the how I like to think of the one dodge versus two dodge is essentially count recharge. If you have like what is that skill? Uh, Shouts on warrior, right? The
Mm-hmm.
for great justice
Mm-hmm.
has count recharge, right? So while your first charge is used, right, it's recharging, but you still have the second charge ready to activate, right? So you gain the benefit of having that. It's kind of like capital, right? Let's make an analogy here. So if you have money in your pocket, right, you can use that money to make more money. um, so it's like the convenience of having something ready to use it whenever. That's basically how I think of count recharge, right? Like the first one is recharging, and then you've still got the second one that you can use whenever, rather than having like one count recharge where if it's off cooldown and it's ready to be used, you're not getting value off of it coming off cooldown anymore, right? So I mean, it's basically like the single dodge is like going from two count recharge to one. So in a way, it reduces your total dodges by a lot, right? Because unless you're using your dodge every single time off cooldown, then you're going to cap out on that dodge, and then you're not gaining any endurance, so it's going to reduce your dodges over time, right?
Hmm.
So you lose kind of like the value of either being able to use your dodge when you want, or you just simply sit at the dodge cap and lose endurance over time. So it was quite a heavy nerf, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, right.
So yeah, I think that's probably, it could probably be good to give them their second dodge back. The thing is, right, when they had two dodges, didn't they also use chaos and like a lot of other things that gave them good sustain?
Of course.
And that, yeah, that got nerfed too. So I think if it had two dodges, it would definitely be a lot stronger. I mean, it would be quite quite a lot stronger. And Mirage is already like borderline playable, so honestly, in my opinion, I wouldn't give the second dodge back, but it's definitely something that it could do, right? It's the double dodge on Mirage is super powerful. So you know, I'm a little bit biased here because I think that when Mesmers are meta, it's, or like when they're the top dog, right? When they're the best class, then the game just always feels like really unplayable. When they're on the lower side of meta, it's usually better off, I think. But yeah, I would be inclined to believe that it's more like a learn to play issue right now with Mesmer. It's still very good. It's still seeing play in monthly ATs. So yeah, I'm inclined to believe that there's just maybe other things that need to be nerfed, not that Mirage needs to be buffed.
I think I agree with you on most part there, actually. Um, we can't really base it off. The game is not active enough team wise to know exactly how well Mirage fits or not, or even solo queue, but I have to agree with you for the most part there. I see, actually, how much Mesmer did you play? I see you play everything, essentially, right? Do you have a sort of a main,
Yeah.
like Thief or Ellie, or,
Oh yeah, definitely Thief.
right?
Um, Yeah, I kind of play Thief the most. I generally play Necro and Guardian as my two like off mains, and then the rest is, it just kind of drops off from there. But lately, I would say the last year or two, I mean, I always multi-classed, just so I can learn every class. What I actually did was, um, I I got all the champion titles in core playing, well, I played Fresh Air Ellie, I think. I'm pretty sure I played Fresh Air Ellie to learn Ellie. I learned core Shatter Mez back in the day,
Nice.
the Power Mez. I learned Longbow Ranger back in the day when Longbow wasn't even like considered viable. This was before the, I don't know if you were back then, but
Hmm.
Longbow got like a rework and made it actually viable. I learned Longbow Ranger before then, and honestly, that was one of the easier builds to play, but it wasn't good. But yeah, I just learned all the build by just playing them, or all the classes by just playing them. And yeah, I still favored Thief, Guardian, and Necro. But nowadays, like the past maybe year or two, I went really hard into multi-classing. Not because I need to learn the classes better, but for like content purposes, really. And it's just, the more you play the game, the more you kind of need to multi-class it to make it interesting. And Guild Wars 2 is really good, right, with how unique and different the classes are. So it really gives you a lot of you know replayability.
It's insane. Like I've always played Angie. In core, I played Grenade Angie, um, which is a thing right now. But lately, like the past year, when I've been able to play with more than 25 FPS for the first time, I've been multi-classing as well, and I've got to say it's the best thing since sliced bread for me because it's just so the game is so interesting. It has so much to offer, and as soon as you reach that threshold of knowledge to kind of not have difficulty trying something else out, like a new class or a new build or a new playstyle, the game just expands so vastly because you got all of these different things you can try out, do, need to learn on the class, and mechanically wise, every class has its own kind of unique playstyles, right? You have to learn how to play them.
Yeah, it is sort of liberating in a way because you can kind of like feel like for thief mains specifically, if you're going against like a really tanky enemy team in PvP, it's going to be like, oh well, I'm countered now. But then you go to Revenant and it's like, okay, this is perfect. This is where I thrive in these long sustained fights. So and Thief isn't really too different from Revenant play. So when you make that jump over, you can kind of like counter more things and make yourself more marketable in a way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially if you're looking at teams. I mean, at team play, because a lot of teams nowadays aren't viable if they can't effectively switch between classes, players, right?
Yeah, it's always nice to have, especially like if a team has like, oh, there's like for example, whatever team, was it RAR, rank 55
Right.
Dragon,
Yeah.
right? They have their duelist is Boicerino, and I'm gonna use the EU. I think you guys talk about EU more often, so I'll use the EU. But Boicerino is he's their duelist usually, and well, actually he played Necro, so I don't know about that, but he also plays their duelist, right? But you get the point that I'm getting at, right? A duelist needs to learn every single kind of like duelist class in that role so that they can not get countered, right? Because if I'm a one trick warrior main and then the enemy team just knows how to play Condi Mesmer, well, yeah, you're kind of countered. So in that way, you kind of need to know all the potential meta builds for your role. If I'm like a roamer main, I guess you really need to know Thief and Rev. If you're a support main, you got to know, support guard, Tempest, maybe a little warrior here, maybe a little, I don't know, scrapper. Probably not at that point.
I played so much Mender Scrapper back in the day, by the way. Like, that's where I learned to res for sure.
Yeah, actually, I think support scrapper is like sleeper in solo queue, maybe not in ATs because the healing that it gives out is kind of like it's a bit slow compared. But in solo queues, it's actually pretty good. You have a lot of like as like a Tempest, you get countered by power damage, right? Because you have to play Fire Tempest.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you kind of do nothing, right? And so that gets countered by power damage. And support Scrapper cleanses its team just almost as much as Tempest, not as much healing, but it also gives out protection. So it's like you're not really countered by power or by Condi. So when I was creating my support video, right, to show all the like ideas about support, and I gave a few builds for it, I did use a support scrapper, and while I was testing that, it seemed like it was getting me a lot of wins. So you just notice these things after a while. It's like I'm playing a bunch of bad builds, and then like this one build, it just starts to perform. So I noticed there that Scrapper was pretty good. And then when I said that, and then people were telling me, well, yeah, duh, it's been meta in World v World for years now. And it didn't really click to me, but yeah, that whole synergy with Scrapper being a support has always been there.
For sure. Like, we can remember rank 55 played Scrapper, Zan, back in the day, right? Worlds.
Yeah, that was more of a duelist though. I'm talking about like a Menders. Well, he did use Menders, but he still used it as a duelist role. But yeah,
Like,
I'm talking more like if you play the role of a support, where you go to team fights more often than to 1v1s.
for sure. Like, I agree with you. I was just thinking the thing that made, like, Denial won 500 to nothing, and then rank 55 won 500 to nothing. A big thing, I think even Sin was the one saying it back then. Scrapper can get into smaller skirmishes and be really effective there, while Ellie is really effective in big team fights.
Do you mean support Ellie?
Yeah, yeah, both support Ellie and
Yeah,
support.
I guess yeah. I mean, it's kind of like yeah, that is very true, right? Because that's the role, right? The duelist prefers to be in smaller fights, and then the supports prefer to be in bigger fights. So that is absolutely the case.
He did play. I don't know if he played Menders, but Paladins for sure though.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think think he was playing Demolisher to counter, like, I don't know if they were playing Warrior back then, but if they did, he would play Demolisher versus that, and then versus Mesmer, I think he ran Menders, right? So it was all about that countering.
Yeah. I I wish I knew more about the meta back in the Heart of Thorns days. I wish I did. That would have been so pog. Even now, sometimes I wish there would be some sort of not a guide, but just a book on matchups. You know, like if I want to try, for example, I tried Soul Beast yesterday, Pew Pew, and I just love to see a little section written on okay, these matchups right now suck. These matchups right now good for you. You know.
Yeah, I wonder where you could get that kind of content.
Is that sarcastic or?
Yeah, it is.
Well,
Uh,
no, for sure. Like yourself, you make a lot of content like that, and sure, there's sites like Gods of PvP. Shout out to Angels and Meta Battle, and but because the meta is changing as well, and the builds are changing. Um, well, what I'm trying to say is it's kind of hard to figure out these little nuances, right? So you need vitality versus condi damage. You need toughness versus power damage. These kind of small little things that are to a main PvPer are kind of everyday knowledge. We should know this, but to anybody that's not really into PvP, they're just not gonna know. And there goes out the window all the build crafting, right? If you don't know those little things.
yeah, it has a lot to do with understanding how much control you have over the situation. So, one thing that's really important is being able to take the information that you gather from a match and interpreting it in a very helpful way. So, like if I go into a match, right, and you said Sikkim Ranger. So, if a Sikkim Ranger is farming my team and me, is it that I need to learn to play against them, or is it that I need to adapt my build better when I see that's on the enemy team? So, um, as like a player who isn't that informed, you don't know the difference, right? It's like, well, am I playing bad? Am I playing good? You can't really know that you're playing good until you are good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, or if someone tells you. So it is kind of hard, right? And I think the solution to that is to just try things out, right? If you think it's your build, then try changing your build and see the results, and be, I would say, be very scientific about it, right? So you want to control all those variables. So like solo queue got a lot of variables in it, so you have to be very you can't be quick to judge something, right? If you're destined to lose a match because maybe it's just not destined to happen for you to win, and then you're like, well, is it the build, or was it my gameplay, or was that just my team didn't have the right comp to deal with their comp that match? You gotta be very well, not quick to judge.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you gotta have a lot of knowledge to know how to adapt to that, right? I see you make a lot of videos on specifics, actually, specific matchups, specifically how to play some versus something against something, with something. Which I gotta say is, I wish again this was back in the day. This kind of content would have been there for me personally, because it took me thousands of games to get into certain play styles that I take days to get into now with all the knowledge, right? To that point, a lot of this podcast, even though it's just a conversation between us, uh, is for everybody out there, especially those that are starting and don't know how to approach something like build crafting, which is still a giant uh, in the not known topic for me, because I've got 10,000 hours. I've been playing for years, but I suck at build crafting, especially if it's something specific. So here's a question actually for you. Right now we see Burn Guard being really prominent on multiple different builds, and the recent patch that we waited for a couple months didn't address the Burn Guard at all. So how would you be approaching this? If
Well, it is kind of interesting because it kind of is, well, it's CMC or ArenaNet kind of asserting that burn guard is maybe not an issue or it's balanced. I think that latest patch was an automated tournament patch, right? It addressed decap ranger, it addressed a bunch of bugs that would be detrimental in high level play, and it also addressed like some sort of like very like meta support specs and stuff like that. So I think you could interpret that as they're not they weren't balancing for like total rank queue. They were just doing like an emergency AT patch so that you know the top players don't complain that the meta is disgusting, because you're not really seeing burn guard too much in ATs, right? It's mostly in rank queue where
Right.
people stand still on a node because they're not as aware, they're not as mobile, they're not paying attention, and then they can get burned down by standing next to each other as well, right? Because permeating wrath is actually kind of funny because it's like coronavirus. I don't know if you want to, if I should be, is it too soon? But
No, no, no. Go ahead.
you want to socially distance basically. There's a burn guard on the other team, but because the more things they hit, the more burning they get out, right?
Right.
So for people who understand that, right, they just, and maybe they have experience socially distancing as well. Um, but if they know that, right, then they know, okay, so in a team fight, I don't want to be standing on the node because maybe my teammate's going to stand on the node, right? You want to have one person on the node and then everyone get away from them so that the burn guard doesn't just permeate them all with their AoE burns.
Yeah.
And obviously, not standing still helps in general as well. But yeah, burn guard, I think, is just a learn to play issue, really, because it's it's kind of easy to play around a single instance of burning, right? They do give cripple and vulnerability if you get hit by the spinny sword, but yeah, otherwise, I mean, most of their damage it's really not existent. You don't stand in traps, you don't just stand in symbols, and then I mean, it's pretty counterplayable. So I would think that it's really not that big of an issue. It is very strong in ranked queues either way, though, so you might want to see it nerfed still, just to allow, because like the issue is you go into rank queue and then your teammates who are maybe not paying attention just instantly die, and then it makes the game kind of feel not as fun. So
Yeah.
probably should just for like there's also like if I want to go on another tangent here, there's also the idea of like balancing. Like, what should we balance? Should we balance for high level play, or should we balance for rank queue, or should we balance for uh, I don't know, hot joins where uh, you can just swap anything at any time. So that is kind of an issue, right? Should Burn Guardian be so powerful in ranked, because that's like 95% of the play there, or even more? Probably, yeah, because that's what most people are going to experience. They're going to experience ranked solo queue, not automated tournaments. Obviously, it's better marketing for the game to balance for ATs, right? Because that's what streams show. But streams also show solo queue. So yeah, that's maybe another tangent. There is like, what is good for marketing, what is good for the actual game, and yeah, Burn Guard in general probably is better off just being nerfed in all cases, I think.
I would agree. The burn is just too much. Like when I see 15 stacks of burn, I, I'm basically a dead body. There's nothing to it, you know. And I can have all the cooldowns available or anything, but I can just get CC'd by some weird, you know, necro fear chain or whatever, and the burn guard's just gonna get me in a moment.
Yeah, that's kind of another thing is, yeah, you can play around Burn Guardian, but that's not the only thing you got to play around. It's a lot of it's like a game of resources, right? Like, yeah, you can play around 7 different one-shot burns, but you've only got 2 dodges and 3 cleanses, so eventually you're going to run out, right? So I would suggest actually lowering the count recharge of the spinny sword to 3 instead of 4, so that you know you have more. They have less options, so therefore you have more options to deal with it.
Let me
Um,
let me ask you a question here. The burning spin sword. You as a build crafter, do you think that's a necessary component of the burn guard?
Absolutely not. I don't even run the burn sword in my burn DH build. I run with the Radiance trait line and the Torch because Torch is a little bit less counterplayable. Let's put it that way. It leaves an unblockable pulsing AOE that you can move along the target with when they're not standing still. So I would say my burn DH build, which is Radiance instead of Zeal, and you just use like really like survivable utilities like Stand Your Ground, Purging Flames, and I use Save Yourselves now, but you can use any other Sunbreak. It's a lot more survivable, so it's a little bit better versus like higher level players. I generally don't like to make builds that are only good for like
Specific.
killing solo queue or low level players because then you go against a good player and then you feel useless.
Yeah, yeah. That's a giant part. I'd say. Like I don't want to dive somewhere completely different now, but the the thing that got me really interested in Rev recently, I guess, was seeing two Revs. One was a decent Rev, a good Rev, but the other one was a really good Rev. And the difference between those two in a duel, it's it's like it's not the same class. If you're watching a something that even counters maybe Rev, sometimes somebody that even that's an experienced player in Rev won't be able to maybe match up versus something that's countering them. A really experienced Rev that's really, maybe a really good mechanical duelist will be able to get away with 100 HP. What I'm saying is there's so let's say you got a build you crafted and you go unranked solo queue. You're not probably gonna have maybe 50% of the time you're gonna be effectively learning and taking in information. The other 50% is just gonna be nothing, right? But then when you come to a higher level, even just a 1v1, not even Q wise, you see stuff that you didn't think about in the lower level because. Okay, so this is why I asked also why are the spinning swords a big part of the build? No, I think the F1 is the biggest part, right? The trait that makes the F1. Yeah, yeah. It just keeps applying burn no matter. Yeah, just don't use the F1 and you keep applying burn basically.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the bigger problem, right? Because as soon as you get into higher rank, you're just watching for that basically. You're just watching for the AOE's, and as soon as they try to pull you, because they're gonna want to pull you, as soon as they extinguish that, they're a free kill basically, especially for an edge or something, right?
Yeah, you would argue, well, I would argue that you can't really play around the F1, right? You just don't get hit by anything because it makes everything you do kind of take up those burns. So, yeah, it is kind of better in higher play to have, to go around, well, with, well, the Radiance traits are going to give you a lot of burn too, so it's not really the permeating wrath too much, but it definitely does add. It's the whole thing I said about resources, right? If you're getting burns on you over time from the permeating wrath, then you're losing health, or you're using cleanses to get rid of those small burns. And if you're using your cleanses to get rid of those small burns, then when I go in with my torch abilities, maybe you won't have cleansing, right? So I think it is pretty necessary, but yeah, it's tough to really say what is the issue here because there's definitely a lot of different things in play, and if you nerf one, then it may not be enough, and if you nerf two of them, then it may be too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't want to make Burn Guard unplayable for sure, right? I mean, it's better to have variety, even though a build may not be that fun to play against. It's probably usually better to at least have it playable.
100%. I think variety is a big component that's missing in some classes. Let's say Necro, for example, has a great variety while Angie does not, right?
Yeah. Necro's a pretty interesting class because it always has a lot of build variety because every build is just another DPS build. So yeah, it's just pretty good at playing that role.
Right. There's what do you think about Condi damage, by the way?
What do you mean, like
Do you like?
Condi easy?
Do
Is
you?
Condi easy?
I don't think
Are
there's
you
an
one of
argument.
those?
I don't think there's an argument there. I do want to know, like, okay, so back in core, I worked my ass off to get 9 stacks of confusion on somebody uh, with my power engine. Now you can get 15 stacks of confusion whilst giving 20,000 other conditions. What do you think of the current of that actually? Let's see.
Well, that's just the response to power creep. If the sustain of the game goes up with more cleansing, then you need more cover condies to play around the amount of cleansing that people have. I think in World versus World, you have cleansing sigil giving out 3 cleanse per swap, and a lot of people use double cleansing, right? So
6 cleanse per
then,
swap.
yeah, 6 cleanse. What do you mean?
I mean that's
You mean
insane.
is it?
I think it is like the amount of I mentioned confusion earlier. Confusion doesn't exist as something that would actually hurt you while using skills, because if you have 15 stacks of confusion, you got every other condition you want in the game on you as well, right?
Yeah, I heard you say 6 cleanse though per swap.
Yeah, because you have double. I thought that's what you said because you have double cleanse
Oh
sigil.
yeah, no. I meant like you swap to one weapon. I guess you're thinking from you're an NG main, right?
Mostly, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're thinking that you've only got one weapon set. I'm talking about like having 2 weapon sets and then one on each. So it's only 3 per swap, but yeah. Um, yeah, the whole cover condies issue. I do have a video. I don't know if you've seen this one. I do have a video on the conditions versus power damage debate, and basically, I hard defend conditions in that video because I think for the most part, people are like, conditions are easy, conditions are less skillful, and in a way that is kind of true. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you got those one-shot power builds, which are probably even easier to play because even though they're riskier, they have a lot less interaction. We talked about this before,
Hmm.
where if I have no sustain on my build, and because condition builds usually have more sustain because they only need 2 stat allocations, right? Condi damage and Condi duration. Whereas power builds need 3 stat allocations. They generally have less sustain, right? A lot of people generally say Condis are easy, and then you look at the build that they're playing, and then they've got no condition cleanse on it, and it's like, well, now we know.
Yeah. I mean, there is a good argument, of course. Of course, Condi is an okay. Like playing Condi builds is a completely skillful experience as well. But there are certain lines where there's just too much, right? Like we were talking about Mesmer earlier. There was a really long time where Mirage, Condi Mirage, was insane, right?
Yeah, so with that, was it really an issue of Condis or was it an issue of Mirage?
It was an issue of Mirage for sure. I would
So
say.
yeah, definitely, I would say it was Mirage as well. So when Mirage got nerfed, um, yeah, they solved the issue because there was no more Mirage. Well, there was still Mirage, but yeah, you didn't have to deal with as many Condis because you didn't have to deal with as many Mirages.
Right. There was even 2 per game. Um, my argument was always like, why make so many stacks of Condis? Like even something like Condi Thief, right? Pew pew pew. Like why not just because the burst from that, if I was playing Angie, the burst would just kill me if I didn't have something like Elixir S or something to save my ass. The burst would kill me. And I was always wondering, talking to Sneaks about this, why not just make the application a bit smaller? You know, like this was I think the whole idea behind the February patch. What's now a year ago, right? The big revamp that made us all switch from Marauder to Zerker. This was kind of the intent, right? Kind of slashing the damage. Still, I think it'd be good, healthy for the game.
You still want it to be nerfed harder?
No, yeah, I don't know. I'm not talking about. I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but if I can be sort of a complete idiot here on this, if something is performing not at 100% but at 120%, nerf that 20% down, right? Like if.
But is Condi Thief performing at 120%?
No, not right now. It was 3/4 of a year ago, though, for sure.
So, do you have an issue with conditions right now?
Burn guard, I do.
Oh, okay. So you're saying burn guard. Okay.
I'm not. Don't get me wrong here.
That's a pretty good one.
Don't get me wrong.
I was thinking you were having issues with Condi Thief because I was going to say, well, Condi Thief doesn't really have the throughput, right? It's got the burst. So if you compare Condi Thief to Power Thief, you're going to die to a Power Thief the same way you die to a Condi Thief, except you have a little bit more interactivity with a Condi Thief because you can cleanse, right? But a Power Thief is going to do the same thing. So it's an issue of Thief usually, not an issue of Condis. But with Burn Guard, you're definitely right that like the burn ticks when you don't have cleanse, they are way too punishing, and when you do have cleanse, it's way too underwhelming.
Exactly.
So I'm really not sure what they can do with that, because if you don't have that, then you'll never kill anything. But when you do have the whole like situation, it feels like it's overkill. But wouldn't you die anyways? Like if you instantly die, like maybe like the burn condition itself might be nerfed to have lower base damage, but isn't that kind of like the identity of burn?
That's the identity.
The highest damage
it is. It is.
Otherwise, you just run poison builds now, or you just run torment builds. So, yeah, I don't know. Burning is a very strong condition, but it needs to also be kind of scarce, I think. So maybe Burn Guardian is like this kind of like out there thing where it's taking that condition and just multiplying it up constantly. So maybe, yeah, Burn Guard just needs lower application, but I am definitely suggesting to nerf it in some ways. Maybe the Permeating Wrath can just be AoE, and then not every 3 hits, but instead every 4 or 5 hits. And that would definitely reduce the application. But yeah, in those situations where you're just getting CC'd in the Dragon's Maw, and then they blow everything, and you get hit by the Spinny Sword, I think you're pretty much going to die no matter what there. So you'll die maybe like a couple seconds later. But yeah, if you don't have cleanse, you don't have a stun break to get out of that, maybe you should die, right? Maybe you should be punished there. Because if that Burn Guardian was playing a power DH, would they not have killed you there as well, right?
Great. I love your objectiveness. I just gotta say this. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with kind of like this psychological bias that we all have, where we have like these logical fallacies where if I see something happen, it's kind of like hindsight, where like, oh, I couldn't do anything about this, or it's a lack of hindsight rather. Like, oh, I forgot that I used all my stun breaks, and then when I die to being CC locked, I'll complain about being CC locked. But you conveniently don't remember where you wasted your stun lock or your stun break, and that's why you died. And then also, if they do bait out your stun breaks and you needed to use them, then shouldn't you die because they baited out your cooldowns? They progressed your resources faster than you progressed theirs.
True that.
So yeah, I think people just don't like dying, and they'll make up excuses, I guess.
That's really on point. It even goes for me, for sure. I don't want to get too hung up on this topic, but I would just like to mention I do miss, you know, the sort of a counterplay. Like confusion was okay. I mustn't use skills. Torment was okay. I mustn't move. Burning, okay. I'm burning, like the highest condi damage in the game. Poison, I mustn't cleanse. You know, heal. I mean, there was these little nuances I felt back in core that were a lot more prominent, and even Path of Fire. Like if we just compare now Burnguard, I played at least 3-4 thousand games on pistol burn NG, even in Path of Fire. And it was core, you know, firearms, smoldering sigil, and it was the fun part for me was stealthing up and getting that burst off. And to get a successful stack of that amount of burns, I would have to time other condis, cripple, all of that other stuff, good jazz, so I could actually get a decent amount of that burn ticks going on. Now you just stand in a trap and get 15 ticks of burn in a moment, right? That I think personally that's an important deviation. You've got all that you want.
That's power creep, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you got any amount of damage that you want to deal with the burn, right? It just doesn't stop. The ticks just keep going up to whatever number. My personal problem, anyway.
Yeah, so it's like there's not as much play around your cooldowns. You're kind of just spamming, and yet it's sort of like it still is very much like the core days where you have to play around cooldowns and resources, but in a much faster pace. So yeah, you do have to watch out. Like if you have torment on you, you gotta watch out and not move as much as possible. But you still have to move because if you stop moving, you die. So in a lot of cases, you will still move, but in the cases where you don't need to move, you'll stop for like a second, and that split second of you not taking the double torment damage is kind of like the moment to moment plays you need to make to come out on top in a power creep kind of situation. So it kind of makes the game a lot less accessible because it's a lot, well, power creep. Power creep definitely benefits more skillful players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like the accessibility issue and why I think that the February balance patch was good because yeah, it made the game maybe a little bit less skillful on the average, but it definitely allowed new players to be able to react to situations better and made the game easier to learn. You know.
Okay. Let me ask you: do you think torment should still do damage if you're not moving?
Yeah, I kind of think it should. Um, I think most of the time you're going to take it anyways because you have to move. But in a lot of situations, when you do take the less damage from torment, you do feel it. So I think it makes a difference enough for you to not take the torment damage. And say like you're playing a bunker build and you're against a here's another thing is right, like you don't want torment to be too counterplayable because if I am say I'm running Scourge's main condition is torment, I think at least, and I'm playing a pretty tanky class that I can afford to get torment on me. Well, I just stand still and I just fight them like that. I just stand still, so they're gonna do no damage to me. So it's important to have counterplay to a skill, but not 100% counterplay. Because if you think of what was it, Diamond Skin for
Mm-hmm.
Ellie's back in the day, it used to be like 100% counter to Condi builds because you couldn't get Condis on you when you're above 75% HP, right?
Right, right.
So that was not healthy, and then they fixed that. So yeah, I think 100% counters shouldn't exist. So definitely Torment should be 50% when you're not moving.
Confusion, the same thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking about that one in the back of my head because that is kind of like 100% counter is to just use nothing. But Confusion is a little bit more different because the only build that really uses only Confusion is Mesmer. and even then they still use a little bit more other condies. So it's kind of like a class identity issue there because, I mean, really, what else uses confusion at that rate? Nothing. So it's more of like a Mesmer thing. And I think it's nice that, I don't know, it just feels really role play, right? Like the how you play around Mesmer is like you don't like attack the illusions because they're just illusions, right? You don't expend unnecessary effort, right? I don't know. I really like the Mesmer class theme and how it's handled in Guild Wars 2, by the way. If I haven't already mentioned, Guild Wars 2 is a really good game.
Guild Wars 2 is the best game ever, from my personal humble opinion. Like I did play some Guild Wars 1 story, of course, just an OG fan like that, but there's no game that can compare to Guild Wars 2 PvP in any way.
Yeah.
It's like fucking
Amen.
it's like fucking Counter Strike and Magic the Gathering kind of being mixed together, right? Because you got all the first person kind of, you got to be really good mechanically, and then at the
Yeah,
same
the
time,
movement and the strategy of Counter Strike, and then the strategy. Well, I said strategy, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah, the kind of like the RPG aspect of Magic the Gathering. Yeah, that's a good comparison.
yeah. You got the mana, right? You gotta everything you gotta be paying attention to. Like I have a friend that I've tried to get into Guild Wars 2 PvP. He was doing really well, but he just didn't give a single fuck about his utility skills. That was, he could move, he could dodge, he could do everything. He just could not interact with those utilities. And then when I pushed him over to do that successfully, he just forgot to move.
That's a keybind issue, isn't it?
I did bind his keys to RGC and that, but it,
Oh.
it's a hard game to get into and be successful in PvP for sure.
Well, yeah, it's not. I mean, WoW has a lot more buttons, but I think people don't really use all those buttons. They just kind of do whatever, and then WoW doesn't. It's not as demanding with your movement. I'm comparing to WoW because that's the other main MMO, but
Right.
yeah, Guild Wars 2 requires a lot more movement. So just naturally, you have not just like it's not about how many keys you have; it's about how many keys you have to press at the same time, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, that is definitely it's kind of yeah hard to get into in that way.
It is. You gotta be, somehow have to like I still haven't mastered the about face. I really rarely use the about face key, even when dueling, and I should. I don't.
Yeah, it's not that important. You'll if you watch like a high tier streamer, they'll just be spamming about face in like 90% of the situations where they shouldn't.
And stowing weapon, right?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with just like being like you just practice that and then you're just doing it. So in the situations where it's better, you just end up doing it. But yeah, it's not really that important. I actually back in the day, like no one really had awareness, right? And how I would get kind of like the same effect is I would my mouse has really like high DPI, and I would literally just swing my camera like really fast, and you can kind of get the same effect doing that. Obviously, there's trade-offs to about face and between about face and using your camera because using your camera makes you face the way that you're moving, and about face can be used to face kind of like keep facing forwards and then move where your character wants to go. So, I mean, it can be like kind of tunnel visiony to do either one. So you just gotta kind of know both, right?
Right.
And use whichever one's better in that situation.
Right. What's your favorite playstyle?
Definitely roamer. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a thief main, so I like to play roamer for sure. Um, I did play League of Legends quite a bit, and I was a jungler there. So just going around the map, creating kills, is just what I like to do, and progressing the map.
Right. So right now, do you play pistol dagger thief, sword
Dagger pistol.
dagger pistol
Um,
thief?
yeah, I play dagger pistol. Um, it's probably my favorite playstyle for thief. but thing is, I've played it so much that I get diminishing returns on it. Like, I don't really get better at Dagger Pistol Thief, really. I'd rather kind of like learn other things because that's for me right now. That's kind of like the fun of it, and it's also kind of like weird in like 90% of situations if I'm playing like my main and I go into solo queue and it's people aren't really up to the level of my DP Thief, then I mean, whether or not I win the game or not can be irrelevant, but like the players that I'm going against, maybe they're not on that level, so it just doesn't feel like I'm learning anything. If I'm going against like really good players, obviously, yeah, I can play DP Thief and it'll be very interactive and challenging, but um, yeah, I'd rather because I kind of just chill in solo queue usually, and if I'm like learning a new build, it kind of puts me on the level of other players who are maybe playing meta builds or playing their main class, and it feels a lot more interactive and fun to me that way. That's why I like to try new stuff out.
That sounds kind of like my situation actually. Like how I learned to play DB Thief was from watching Sin stream all these years for sure. Even when I wasn't really actively playing, I was still like catching his stream here and there. And throughout the years, I just saw so much of the DP Thief that when I finally picked it up, I knew exactly what I was gonna do with it. I knew exactly what I was gonna search for. And it's that playstyle that right now resonates with me more than anything else, for sure. Like, I play DP Thief now more than anything else. And I stray, even though I'm trying all like everything that I can get my hands on, which I should, and I should expand my knowledge. I just can't play these static builds. I'm just not interested. Like mid game, I'll be standing still healing, and I won't be interested in, you know, finishing the objective that I should be finishing because I want to be porting away and getting it to another fight or something.
Have you tried Tempest?
But a bit. You mean support Tempest?
Yeah, like fire support Tempest.
Yeah, Conde
That
Cleanse. Yeah.
Yeah, that feels a lot to me like the thief of supports because in a way you can't really stand on node. You are very squishy, so you have to like be very safe with your positioning. And then you do have quite a bit of CC and damage, and you have like blinks and stuff, and it allows you to kind of be like the roamer version of the support because you go around healing people, but you've also like for me it's a lot of fun to play Tempest because it fits like the play style that I like in Guild Wars 2, but it's like another role that's similar to that playstyle in a way. Like if I play support Guardian, it's very like kind of slow, and yeah, I do like Guardian, but I don't really like support Guardian because it's really slow. But to me, Tempest really feels fun. I think you should give it a try if you do want to get into a support build just to try something out. The Fire Tempest, obviously.
I will do. I will do for sure. Try it out. Um, Wait, I just lost my train of thought. I was gonna ask you something.
Is it about Thief?
I think yeah, the playstyle. Okay, yeah, Power Rev. You ever play Power Rev?
Oh, yeah, I do have pretty. I think I have the most viewed Power Rev video in Guild Wars 2. It's like 40,000 views.
Which one's that?
So Power Rev, Power Herald.
That's how it's called.
Yeah, it's like a comprehensive Power Rev guide. Like you might not think that I know how to play Power Rev, but yeah, I played quite a bit of Power Rev back in the day because not only is Power Rev like a really just super strong build, it's also just the most fun version of Revenant.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be honest, like it's broken, but it sure is fun to play.
it's so
And
fun.
yeah. So I played it quite a lot, and it does have. I will say it's not the same as playing Thief. A lot of people say it's the same as Thief. It's really not. Um, it's very much about. It's more like Warrior with ports, right? It's about just being aggressive as possible and not leaving that fight until you've killed every single opponent. Thief is like, well, yeah, okay, so I need to go to mid, and I need to get this kill, but I don't have enough, throughput to, kill the entire enemy team. But maybe they'll, be able to survive long enough and get the advantage off that single kill that I got them, while I go somewhere else and maybe get a kill there or get a decap here and there. And then when my steal comes back off cooldown, I'll come back and maybe get the second kill. But the Rev is just like, just burn everything.
That's
In a
a
way,
perfect.
it's a lot less, thinking, but a little bit more mechanical to it.
You described it exactly the way I was thinking it, like, to the bone. Like, I always equate power rev to a pit bull. Like, as soon as he latches onto an ass, just doesn't let go. He's just gonna fuck that shit up, right? He's gonna ruin your day. Thief, like, is exactly as you said. It's gonna be a lot more tactical. Power rev's a lot more mechanical. But I just wanted to make those, like, after trying out Thief, I went to Power Rev and saw these. My thirst for this was kind of clenched as well on Power Rev. This is why I'm trying Sikkim Soul Beast. It's not really the same thing, but it's got a lot of damage. I really find that these kinds of builds are the most fun in Guild Wars 2. Roamer kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I did a whole series on the roles. I don't know if you've seen that. And yeah, my roaming video does have Thief and Sikkim Ranger in it. Also Power Mesmer, and I think I put in, what was my last roamer build? It was Thief, Mesmer, Sikkim Ranger. I don't remember. But yeah. There's very few roamer builds that are kind of like viable, because Thief Rev and Thief kind of usually fill that role best. Mesmer here and there, but yeah, it's generally. Oh yeah, of course, Power Rev was the fourth one. I forgot about Power Rev. We were just talking about that. So yeah, roaming is kind of unforgiving, because if you get caught in roads trying to fight a thief, well, if you're not suited to fight a thief, yeah, it's gonna abuse you a lot. And I think the reason why revs can kind of handle thieves is because they kind of ignore the thief and they go to where they need to be, and then they create like a 2v2 situation. And in a 2v2, a rev is a little bit more useful than a thief. But like if the thief catches the rev before they get to the 2v2 situation, then the thief has the advantage, right? But the
Right.
rev just ports away, and they get target and port to where they need to be.
Yeah, Rev is also, it's heavy damage. I mean, heavy class. It has heavy damage. It does thrive in that scuffle. Like, if it can get in the middle of that and get away with a glint without being seen, really good. I do get, on Power Rev, I get picked off by good thieves in the roads, for sure. A good thief will know to pick a Rev in the middle of the roads and not a fight.
Yeah, I think that's one thing though that really helps me when I play Rev, is as a thief main, because I don't get abused by thieves, because I know exactly what the thief is thinking. I know exactly how to play around it, and a lot of times I can just 1v1 the thief as a Rev. So um, it is not as hard of a losing matchup as people think it is, right? Like they think thief counters Rev, but it's really dangerous to fight a Rev as a thief still. You have to play so patiently, and in Conquest PvP, you don't have the time to play around that matchup safely all the time, right? You're on a clock. So,
Right. Do you play Battle Scars, by the way?
I mean, Dance of Death?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, how would you, just to sum up kind of the build crafting, let's say current meta, and let's say you were, what's your preferred class to theorycraft? Do you have one?
I'm really liking Ellie right now, to be honest, because it is a very high risk reward kind of class. So it rewards um, really. It's kind of like you're never good enough at Ellie. You can always get better. So it's one of the more fun classes for someone who's looking to really um, well, to get some sort of like infinite value out of learning, because I'm definitely not one of the better Ellie players. Maybe my Tempest play I've got a lot of practice on. I'd say I'm pretty good on Tempest, but like Fresh Air, Light and Rod, I don't really know those that much. Fireweaver I would say is pretty simple to play. I can play that pretty well. But other than that, I try out some staff on Ellie, and that is a lot of fun. So
Oh, I watched a video of yours, a couple actually on Staff Alley.
yeah, staff Ellie is like the god tier. If staff Ellie was meta, then that would be, I don't know if that'd be a good or bad thing, but I would enjoy it for sure because it's I don't know, it just feels so rewarding to like land a really good staff combo. And yeah, there are some issues with staff where it's hard to land your skills on someone if they're moving. But with like the Tempest package, I usually run staff Tempest. You can get overloads, which are a lot easier to hit people in melee range. So it's kind of like the idea of staff on Reaper. You have melee damage, which is like built into your kit, and then you have the staff, which allows you to poke. So it like balances out your stuff. So like the staff weapon on Ellie is like the exact opposite. You have your overloads for melee range, and then you have your staff for like range damage. So I really like that interaction there.
Right. I've noticed you say a lot of this actually. Kind of even in your analogies, you're kind of looking for that balance in any way. Like, I think this is a really interesting aspect of if you're trying to build craft, because you're looking at all these different variables, right? Like maybe for me, this was the exact problem, build crafting, because I'm never taking everything into consideration because I can't, literally I can't, like actually, if I want to make a toolkit uh, build on Angie, right, with the pull, I will fail to take everything into consideration and make a balanced build. This is what I'm noticing with you. You're taking kind of everything into consideration.
Yeah, I would say there are some like requirements or minimum to every build. So you gotta have Condi Cleanse to like a decent amount. Because Condi Cleanse even versus power builds is just gonna be good, right? You get vulnerability on you, you cleanse that, power builds do less damage. So
Mm-hmm.
I think Condi Cleanse is definitely one of the necessary components. I also like to have disengage on a build. If you can't disengage or survive focus, then you're going to be a free kill, and it doesn't matter how good your build is. As soon as the enemy realizes they can kill you easily, they're going to be promoted to do that more often, right? So, like, it's kind of like this idea of presence. The more survivability your build has, the more aggression you can also have on it because you can play more riskily and not get punished. So yeah, I would say survivability, Condi Cleanse, disengage. You want to definitely have the abilities to survive, but then you also want to have all of that while having like some sort of like synergy to your build. So like you have like what's the meme of your build, or what is the like the main idea of your build? Is it that, oh, I'm a Sikkim Ranger, so I want to do a one shot burst. And then you have to build all of these other pieces around that one little, central package to make it a balanced build. So if you don't get those things naturally with your package, then you have to get it elsewhere with like runes, sigils, or utility skills. So, like for example, I recently my roamer video has like a power mirage build. Well, power mirage doesn't really have any cleanse if you don't take inspiration, so I tried to go for cleanse on a power mirage with domination and dueling.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get cleanse? Well, resistance rune, double cleansing, and just straight up just having as much distortion as possible. So yeah, that's kind of how I dealt with it. I put on the resistance rune. There's also like this regeneration trait in Mirage where you have like lesser condition durations, which it doesn't stack additively with the resistance rune, but it's kind of nice as well to lower conditions that you take.
Mhm.
And yeah, you just play around being squishy, but you also have answers, right? It's kind of like going back to that trading card thing where it's like I have something in my pocket and I pull it out to deal with the situation. If you, it's kind of like the idea of being in control of the situation. If you have all these answers, then you can control the situation. But if you just have like this insanely strong burst and that's it, well, then you're only going to be good when that burst is needed. And you can't survive and bait until that moment where your burst is needed, right? So that's kind of my mindset is to survive, and then once I'm surviving and I'm providing the, you know, the very basic amount to just my team where I am present because I'm alive, then I can perform my secondary role, which is whatever my, you know, build is.
Right. Do you ever dive into team comp?
Uh, I was actually thinking about that the other day. I was thinking if I wanted to play an AT with 5 clones of myself, what 5 builds would I play? I did do a 3v3 comps video.
I saw that one. I saw that one.
Yeah, that was so much fun for me. I would do more comps like that if I had more control over what people play, but I can't just tell people, hey, you have to run this comp.
No.
And, you know, making people do experimental comps is going to be difficult. So, but yeah, if I really wanted to say my favorite comp, it'd probably just be my favorite 5 classes in each role. So probably Tempest support, probably Power Rev as one of your DPSs, probably a Thief as well, and probably a Necro in there somewhere, and a Guardian maybe. I don't like duelists usually, so maybe I would just run a no duelist comp, or yeah, it would be like Meditation Guardian, Meditation Core Guardian is one of my favorite builds of all time. So it'd just be like 4 roamers and 1 support, really. That'd be pretty fun.
I'm
And
sure.
then you don't hold nodes at all because Tempest can't hold node, Thief can't hold node. I guess you're. Did I say Necro? Yeah,
Yeah.
Reaper. Maybe you could run Core Necro. It's interesting. But yeah, I like Reaper more than Core, but Core is pretty fun too. So I guess like some sort of Necro, Power Rev, Thief, Mediguard, Tempest. That'd be a lot of fun.
That sounds interesting. Like, you wouldn't focus on nodes at all? You'd just go for the kills?
Well, I would have to hold nodes. I guess the Guardian and the Rev could hold nodes, but if they went against like a dedicated duelist, they'd be stripped for time, so they'd probably give that up immediately. And if they're gonna lose it, that is, and then just try to get kills. You know, play a 2-point strat really.
Do you ever play with a team or do you only solo queue?
I used to play ATs a lot in the beginning when ATs came out. I have a lot of AT videos, but nowadays ATs I think are kind of dead, especially on NA, because well, yeah, they're not that dead on EU, but on NA it's kind of like you only really have one good match per AT, which yeah, it does give you a lot of gold reward, but I don't really play for gold anymore at this point. I play for content, so
No.
I feel like ranked queues give a little bit more quality on average. Like the matches can be a lot worse than the potential of an AT match, but in ATs often you'll get 500 O's until like, you know, finals maybe. So I mean for some teams ATs are pretty good, but I think yeah, maybe on average they're not the best.
So I saw you, or am I mistaking, switch between regions many times? EU and NA?
Yeah, I have an alt account which I can put on EU. I just like to swap to whichever server is the current like prime time because you get better matches on EU if I play in the mornings, and I'll get better matches if I play during NA prime time because EU EU off prime is really bad. So generally, it's always okay to play on NA because of how spread out the time zones are. But yeah, you only want to play on EU during EU prime time.
Yeah, does the ping do any problems for you, or?
Yeah, it definitely does. Especially after the server changes. I get like 200-ish ping on EU now, which it's not unplayable, but it is definitely difficult on more melee-oriented classes like Thief, Warrior, Rev.
Right. Especially you're getting that timing of the backstep and all of that. I tried on NA just for fun. I couldn't fucking bear it.
But you only had like 130 ping, right?
I had more. I had like 250, I think,
Okay.
at least.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. Then that's pretty bad. Okay. Usually EU people get better ping on NA than NA do on EU.
How come?
I think it's the positioning of the servers. New York is where the servers are now, I think, or Washington D.C. I don't know, but that's basically East Coast, so it's like right next to. Well, it's not right next to, but you cross an ocean and then it's right next to you.
Yeah.
And then for NA, I think the servers you got to cross the ocean and then go to Germany. Is it where it is?
Yeah, Germany. Yeah.
Yeah, so German people have pretty good ping on EU.
Yeah, it was weird. I have a friend from Germany that she plays, and every time the servers lag, they lag for me at the exact same moment, because Slovenia is the same timeline as Germany.
Yeah.
So you can see the server lag simultaneously. And ping, I don't even know what I'd do. I mean, I tried it as I said, but I had a really bad computer as well. Maybe it's gonna be different this time. But yeah, you do play EU as well at Pride time.
Not so much anymore, but I used to back in the day.
Are you looking for any team play? Like you're looking for content. In my opinion, the best content for a PvPer at the end of it is forming a team and doing that. Not for you?
The thing is, that kind of requires a lot of investment because especially if you're trying to be a really good team, you got to be doing scrims. You've got to be investing a lot of time into playing meta builds. It's not really worth it for me as a content creator. If I do become an ArenaNet partner, though, I would immediately jump on ATs because I know how the meta works and all that. It's not that fun to play it really, but watching it here and there, it could be fun. Oh, and by the way, I'm talking about being an ANET partner, so I can spectate ATs.
Yeah, you're not an ANET partner yet?
No.
That's weird. Like, you've been streaming for a long time, actually, right? When did you start streaming?
Yeah, I was streaming since Heart of Thorns.
Yeah. I remember the chat cover where it's feeling so many of them lost here, right?
Yeah.
That's so old.
Very old one. I have not really changed that until maybe like a few months ago, and then I swapped to another one.
I hope they partner you soon, man. You deserve it for sure.
Yeah, it might happen soon.
You're putting out a lot of videos, and you're definitely like my kind of circle here in Guild Wars. Your name comes up a lot. Even 1 year ago, when we were starting all this podcast and the in-houses, your name came up a lot. Especially when we were talking about builds, this and that. Vallun just put out this and that build,
Not always in a good light, I'm assuming.
Not mostly in a good light, I have to say. I'm not even trying to sugarcoat anything.
Oh, he created this mini Mancer build. Now he destroyed the rank queues.
That kind of shit, yeah. Or like, I have no idea
what kind of cancer did he come up with now?
Or there's gonna be a build that we're gonna be bitching about, and many times I remember people came and said like, yeah, Vallun just made a build about that, a video about that, like how to counter that, right? Which
are you talking about like Condi Thief?
Maybe. Like I I can't remember the specific examples, but I can tell you for sure your name came up many times as in an answer to a problem.
Yeah, I'm a pretty good problem solver. I mean, that's kind of how I approach a lot of things, is solving them. Maybe that's a little bit too
But,
judgmental, maybe, to interpret them as problems, but I like to think of things as, solutions and problems, or like a conflict, and you don't necessarily have to solve the conflict, but you do have to come to terms with it, maybe.
mm-hmm. Right.
So, that's kind of that kind of fits into my build creation as well, like problem solving as well, inventing, having a purpose. It all fits in kind of like my mindset of how I look at things.
Right. So, where are you planning to take your content now? Especially over the past, I'd say, a year. I see a lot of beautiful thumbnails of yours for your videos. So, you're taking your content seriously enough for.
Yeah, I am. It's actually really fun for me to like get better. I feel like I'm getting really, really good at editing now. Like, I used to have really like low quality content before. It's just that it was kind of like the only content that existed on that topic because I just knew a lot. But it's like, well, he knows a lot, but he isn't very good at editing or marketing. So, it takes like the fun part is the entire kind of like experience of like writing something up and creating an experience for an audience. But there's some work that you got to do on the side that maybe isn't that fun. Like, editing can sometimes be repetitive,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'm getting a lot better at it now, and I feel better like about my content, like that. It's actually not only that I'm getting more views, which is that's always nice, but that I'm actually, because my content is helpful, that it's getting out to help more people and potentially going to improve things. I hear from a lot of people that I make Guild Wars 2 playable for them because they're not like, maybe not their best theory crafters, and the meta isn't really fun for them, so they kind of, I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron, right? They don't like meta, but they copy my builds. But yeah, I think it's important to have, i I consider myself sort of a rebel. I am the enemy of the meta, but at the same time, I need to know the meta to create all this off meta stuff. So
Right, right. You need to know your enemy better than your friends in that respect, for sure. Keep your enemies closer than your friends. I meant to say, I guess.
yeah, it's true.
I think that's really awesome. Like, you're a very unique aspect of the community corner, and that because nobody's doing this, nobody's making up interesting builds so often. So
There are some people making builds like this. I know Paper Roll is a pretty good YouTuber. He's not that popular, but he does make kind of like, I mean, I don't agree with his builds. They're kind of wacky. One thing that, I mean, I consider myself a build elitist, even though I'm off meta. But like, I don't agree with some of his build choices because he like goes too hard on the synergy. Like, how I was talking about like, you need survivability. I mean, he does like World v World. I don't know if he does that much PvP, but he does World v World and like PvE.
Mhm.
And his builds are like way too like, you don't want to tunnel vision on the synergy of your build because then like you just die, right? So I mean, he has some really good build videos. Paper Roll, by the way.
Mhm.
But they lack like the refinement, I feel, that I would see in like a Vallun build maybe. There's also, I think, Engel is another good YouTuber. He's like budget Vallun in a way. He has like that same kind of like the same kind of like tone to his videos. Maybe he's a little bit younger than me, so maybe he's a little bit less what I'm looking for, thoughtful. Maybe he's a little bit quick to come to conclusions.
Hmm?
But yeah, there's definitely competition out there for builds, but it's hard to compete with someone who's been doing it for a really long time.
For sure. Actually, I'll notice when I'm talking to experienced players from back in the day when they were in teams, individuals like Frey and TCG rank 55 basically, they'll have this understanding of some stuff that you can only get through some sort of experience regarding that. Like, I don't even know actually an example that I'm thinking of right now, but just a matchup, to know exactly not to take it. Okay, just run away, something like that.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with understanding not just your role, but also like the entire map state. These players who've been playing tournaments, what they do is they go into a scrim, and the scrim is like a very scripted state. So you have whatever the meta is, you have, say, like a team fight, and then you have your duelists. Say that's the meta right now. You have
Hmm.
a 4 team fight, and then you have duelists, and each team goes into like scrim over and over against each other, and the situations are very similar over time, but they learn how to handle each situation because they keep going over it over and over. So it's like if we win the team fight, then we immediately go to far and we try to snowball from there. Or if we lose, we go to home and try to regroup, push out their duelist, and then go back into mid. So they're kind of like understanding the entire team, not just themselves, right? And that's a really important part of rotating, not just knowing what your role is, but knowing every single player's role. And it's kind of like a chess game, really. It's players who are able to like macro rotate like that are definitely on a different level for sure.
Hmm. I've noticed lately in my games, I've been duo queuing with a Soul Beast, and like, she can't get off a good burst in a 1v1. It's because Soul Beast, I don't think is, or at least she's playing Core Ranger now. Even those kind of builds can do it. And when I should be focusing another fight with a thief, usually we're doing unranked, I will rather go burst with her because I know, I'm gonna get a kill faster with her. Theoretically not, but in practice for sure. And I think that has of course to do with kind of the health of the game, of course, because this is the level of gameplay you're gonna see, right? I'm at a spot where I should be. Theoretically, everything works. I'm a thief. I should be bursting this guy down. But my team, my guys that are the builds they should be running, but aren't doing what they need to be doing, right? I shouldn't be in this situation. I should make use somewhere else. I'm kind of alluding to the second topic now, but at the same time saying...
Yeah, I noticed.
yeah.
So what you're trying to say is playing around an ideal situation and playing around maybe suboptimal situations.
Yeah, and there's an aspect of learning, right? So let's say the situation I just mentioned. If I do that too much or enough, I'm gonna get used to the wrong rotation. I'm gonna get used to the play. Okay, I shouldn't be doing what I should be doing. I should in fact be doing what I shouldn't be doing. Sorry for kind of getting weird here. I should be rotating into the matchup because I'm gonna get a kill, but I'm not gonna get a kill. So I'm gonna rotate the other way because I know my teammate. Even though it's not the right matchup, I'm gonna get the kill with them, and you get the habit of doing the wrong rotations. They may pay off in the game. You may know that they're actually the counter of what you should be doing, but when it comes down to repetition, when you're actually, it's like hitting the mitts with the wrong hand. You're not hitting them with the lead hand. When the fight comes, you don't know how to hit with your lead hand anymore, right?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's only really an issue for people who kind of play to muscle memory too much. Because normally, like if you're in a suboptimal situation, you're being aware. Like a good player will be aware of the situation and they'll adapt to it. They're not saying, "Oh, maybe I should just from now on do this." It's no, it's just this situation. You have the knowledge that your teammate, even though they should be winning their 1v1 in an ideal situation, this is not an ideal situation, and therefore I have to make the judgment call of, well, do I help this person and help them win their 1v1 or cut my losses and just get something done elsewhere? And I think when players say that they get used to playing around unideal situations, it's more of like an excuse for them to not have to think as much, maybe.
Yeah. Interesting viewpoint, yeah.
But yeah, you're talking about how like the the like the balance of the matchmaker sort of like influences the meta,
Hmm.
or like the kind of plays that people make depend on the players that are in the match.
Oh, for sure. Like if I know that it's a really good guy on my team, like whoever it be, let's say Boyce, you mentioned him before, I'm gonna make sure that I'm, sticking with him. Let's say because I know he's gonna get the right plays done, right?
But also, if you stick with him, then you may be putting too much there, right? He might want you to, because he might be able to handle that himself, right? So he wants you to go somewhere else, maybe. It's also very possible.
Oh yeah, it's always situational for sure. Um, we're almost going on 2 hours here, so I don't want to take up all of your night. Um, so let's just start and see how long we go for. What do you think are the necessary requirements for a healthy community?
A community, well, that depends on a lot of factors. A community is kind of like an ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
A community is not just the video, right? We're talking about a video game community. It's not just the video game in which they're in, right? The environment. I guess like if we look at an actual ecosystem, right, like a rainforest. Rainforest is the climate, it's the the trees and the rainfall and all that, but it's also the animals, and well, we can maybe use that a little bit literally when we talk about some of the builds people play. The animals or the inhabitants that exist in that ecosystem, right? The ecosystem is the players and the environment. So a healthy environment is the requirement of a healthy environment. Um, yeah, it's definitely tough because you're gonna need a healthy. Sorry, you said I said environment, but it's a healthy community. So a healthy community requires not only a an environment that's going to promote the health of the inhabitants, but it's also going to require inhabitants that promote the health of the environment. So it's sort of like this feedback between the two, right?
Mhm.
And it's kind of like the if you've ever heard of brain drain before.
No, actually.
You never heard of it? It's like this idea that if if you're like, it's typically used in the context of like jobs and stuff like that. So if you have a lot of talented people in your area, then you can start a lot of businesses that will basically promote other people to come in and join that. So if you don't have those talented people, then you can't get more talented people, right? So you see how it's sort of like snowballs on itself. And if you don't have talent, if you don't have a if you don't have talent, then you don't have a good environment. You don't have a good environment, you don't have talent. So that's kind of like the idea of a healthy community, right? You need to have a good environment for those players to play in, balanced patches, community events, tournaments, but you also got to have the players to be in those, right?
Right.
So, I guess if you're making the current state of the game the topic, then the health is definitely in question here, without a doubt, right? The health of PvP is definitely it's not doing so good because there is that lack of talent, right? The inhabitants, there may be casual, right? That's completely fine if you're a casual player, but the more casual players that are in games with higher level players because of population issues, the the less interactive those matches are going to feel, right? You're going to want to have,
Mm.
the matchmaker putting people of equal skill up against each other. And if there's a lot of high skilled players, then they'll be in matches with each other. If there's not, then you're going to have those matches where it's like, okay, we're a duo queue of, double rev, and then everyone else is just pigs to slaughter, right? And it's not going to be very fun for either, the slaughterers or the pigs there,
Slutty.
because because the pigs are just going to be dead, and then the rev duo. That's the stereotypical tryhard two revs.
True that.
They're not going to have fun just killing people that don't really fight back, and having people on their team that aren't really helping them that much either. So yeah, it requires you to have that talent, but why isn't the talent there, right? Why aren't there more experienced veteran players? Well, it's because they weren't given an environment to for a really long time. So yeah, it is very, it's like a difficult thing to address because yeah, we do need tournaments in Guild Wars 2, but we need those tournaments to also be interactive tournaments, not with just one team in them, and then everyone else is just kind of actors,
Yeah.
side roles, right?
The usual Guild Wars 2 PvP experience regarding ATs anyway. Get the main attraction and then all the rest. Which we need, yeah. Yeah, we need more teams. We need more teams for sure.
Well, how are you gonna get it?
Uh, you want to try and answering that one?
I think I did answer it. I said it's difficult, and you got to do everything. You got to do everything, because if you do one thing, then you're going to be lacking in the other thing, and if you do that other thing, then you're going to be lacking in the other thing that supports that other thing, right? So you need
For
to
sure.
market the game and get more players in. You need to also provide. It's kind of like catering to. It's like a lot of tangents here because this is such a complicated topic, right? How do you create a world, right? How do you create a world,
Essentially, yeah.
right? So, I mean, it does have a lot to do with creation of. I mean, you don't create new people, right? Like we do in IRL, where you just have a baby. We need to invite new people to come in. So the marketing of the game is very important. The sustain of those people that are gonna come in, so they need to stay. So there needs to be some kind of appeal to play. I mean, I guess tournaments are always fun, but it's not going to keep people playing the game day in day out, right? They need to have something meaningful personally to play the game for.
For sure.
So yeah, and then like the whole catering to, like we said this before, do you balance towards ATs or do you balance towards ranked queues, right?
Right.
Because if you balance towards ATs, you're really not balancing towards the majority of the player base. So how are you going to get players to keep playing the game to get to the point where they can play ATs if the tools and resources they have, such as rank Q, to actually learn and get to that level, aren't being attended to. The way that the game is presented to those new players is by the veteran players, right? So it's not only important that the top level is good so that it can kind of, it's not really a trickle down, it's like a trickle up. But, um, if you support, actually, let's just not go with that analogy at all. If you support the top end, then they're going to be the ones teaching the bottom end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's definitely, I would say that it's definitely what I'm trying to do, right? That kind of sums up what I'm trying to do, is to instill the spirit of what I enjoy in the game for others to enjoy, and maybe they'll stick around. I'm not doing this as like a marketing stunt. I'm not I'm not trying to get other people to do it, but it's just kind of like a happy coincidence that what I enjoy in the game is what other people enjoy. And yeah, it can get kind of competitive. PvP is a competitive game mode,
Of course.
so it can be disheartening sometimes, and people need to learn faster than is really possible, because you got to know everything to learn, right? Like to learn rotations, you got to not only know your role, but you got to know all the other roles at the same time. So where do you start?
Right. And one thing regarding that, especially that you mentioned on stream a couple days ago, which I gotta say, I'm kind of ashamed I didn't think of this or see this before, ever. Before you mentioned it just a couple days ago, is that the Path of Fire and Heart of Thorn specs are a lot more complicated than core specs.
Like just elite specs in general, or Path of Fire specifically?
I think Path of Fire is even more than Heart of Thorns, maybe. But the first time I ever thought of that, I was like, oof, that's a big thing, actually. I've forgotten that core builds are a lot more simple.
That's fine though, right? Because I have a lot of like design philosophies that I learned from Hearthstone, because they do have a lot of transparency with Hearthstone. But one thing that they talked about is, someone asked them, why do you have such bad cards in the game? Hearthstone is a card game.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the developers said, because that is how you teach players how to play the game. They learn by progressing from these bad cards. They realize, when I play this card and they play that card, it's the same mana cost, but their card is better, and they see why it's better, and they learn, okay, let me stop using that card. But it's a good starting point, because if they're just using meta decks right out the bat, then they don't have that learning curve. And that's why I think core specs shouldn't necessarily be, it's nice if they're balanced to the level of elite specs, but it's kind of like nice as like, it's hard for me to realize what it's like to start over, because I learned all the core specs when they were the strongest specs.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're coming into the game now and you're trying to learn Mirage, that's difficult. You're gonna want to start out maybe with something more simple, where you maybe got two dodges, or your dodge doesn't create an ambush attack where you need to like do a combo skill, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just more simple, the core specs, and they should be more simple, because that is the learning curve, right? And as you're starting your first character, you're going to be playing core until you level up your, if you're only playing PvP, then you can just play whatever, which is nice too, but generally people start out in PvE and learn there. So I think it's the core specs are a really good learning curve. So I think that, I don't know how we got to this. I'm really bad at going on tangents, but what were we talking about?
Don't worry about it.
How do I bring this back?
I just mentioned the core specs being a lot more simplistic than elite specs.
Oh right, yeah, what I said on stream.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you go on tangents, man. I'm following. Don't worry. Like, even if we get lost, who gives a fuck? Honestly, honestly.
Yeah, so how does that tie into the health of the ecosystem? Um, should certain specs be better than others? Probably, yeah. Does that mean that the game is unhealthy for them to have imbalance? Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, that learning curve for sure. Like, especially because you do not have many players that would come in and go PvP. Like, even if they would want to, you can't just learn things about the game, like basic mechanics, just off the bat going into PvP. So that argument, in my head, it holds up. Yeah. Although the power creep, even CMC, when we had him on the podcast, he said it's intentional. If you put out something new as a game, you want people to play that, and you're gonna power creep it. It's it's another thing having it in the game so prominently now. But yeah, to that, another thing that you said at the beginning is ArenaNet stating right now that Burnguard is balanced. That's that's actually true. Like, if they're not addressing it, then they are pretty much stating that. Sometimes it's kind of hard to think
In a
of
way,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of hard to
There
think of it
could
in that way.
definitely be, like I kind of talked about before, where that was an AT patch and not rank patch, but there could be other reasons.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they're not gonna communicate what they are, as they never do. But I think it's kind of better taking it that way than just saying, "Oh, they don't know shit," right? They don't know what they should balance or they shouldn't.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Maybe they're, maybe they're. This is how they state it. Maybe they're not gonna write a statement, but this is how they state it. I think that's, I don't know, just a healthy perspective. Uh,
Yeah, that's another thing is people, I don't know, they get kind of stuck in their own like minds and they don't understand the point of view of other people. I try to be very um, forgiving to ArenaNet, not because I'm a simp to ArenaNet. Can I say that word? But yeah, I'm very critical of ArenaNet, but also at the same time, I understand what it's like to work at a business. I understand that there is some bureaucracy going on there where CMC doesn't have all the power that he needs to balance the game. And he's also got more information than all of the players who are, armchair balance philosophers.
Archer
Um,
balance philosopher.
yeah.
That's such.
So, I mean, you have to give him some credit because, first of all, he knows more than we do, probably. He's got all the statistics. So I'm going to take his word on the burn guard balance thing. But I think a lot of players really they resort to, being not just critical of ArenaNet, but just like attacking the kind of like the credibility of ArenaNet, saying like, oh yeah, this company's bad and they don't know what they're doing, and really maybe it's not a cause of their incompetency, but a cause of something that you aren't aware of, like, oh, we can't do this because we're balancing the game for End of Dragons, and therefore, if we're trying to balance the game now and then balance the game for then, we're balancing two timelines. Is that really practical at all? Like balancing for two different timelines right now? Because, like, you know how development is usually ahead of time, they don't develop one night before.
Usually.
So, yeah. I mean, the balance definitely should be a little bit more active, I would say, because, I mean, you could argue that balance is better to not be active because balancing the game more often actually is better for veteran players because they're better at adapting, they know more stuff, and worse for new players because they're, new players are usually like one tricks, they can only play their one class because they can barely even play that class. And when you balance the game and make that one class that they can't play very well worse, kind of like hurting them, right, and making them adapt when they're not as able to adapt. So it is kind of like you have to take into the account these trade-offs that most people really don't take into account because they're stuck in their own little head there.
Yeah.
Like it's probably better that the game doesn't get more balance patches to an extent because it is more forgiving to new players, given that the state of balance is forgiving to new players. Now, obviously, if it's like a power creep meta, then it should probably have a little bit more change to make the game less power creep. But and then yeah, that goes back into whether you should cater to new players or to veterans more. Balancing more is catering to veteran players more.
Yeah, that's a good argument actually. I mean, every time that I played, when I played NG, just NG, every time when they nerfed a prominent build that I was using, that fucked me over so bad. Because I was such a noob, I didn't know how to play anything else, and that build was gone. I was like, what do I do now? Like, what do I play now? And I think that screws with a lot of people that are just one-trick ponies. So that's a good argument. Like if they'd be doing, other games have balance every week, right? A lot of other games anyway. If they'd be doing it this often in Guild Wars or anything like that, maybe it would. Maybe PvP wise, the game is such a game that a player needs a certain amount of time to get used to all of these variables, and if they would make such fast changes, maybe it would really not result in people not being able to play anything, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. But there's also got to be a balance there. Like if it's too stagnant, then there's no content. Well, the players got to make their content to some extent, but yeah, ArenaNet's got to give them some content, and balance patches are content for sure, especially for PvP game modes. But yeah, in terms of like, you've definitely seen this before, where someone says like, "Oh, I used to play Guild Wars 2, but then they nerfed Thief. I like to play the pistol. Yeah, I like to play the pistol Thief, but then they nerfed that, so I just left." And you gotta, at that point, you gotta kind of have to realize, well, you can't cater to everyone.
Of course, yeah. Of course. I mean, especially in today's world where games are such a giant, like you have stadiums getting filled with people for playing, teenagers playing games, right? This, there's such a giant market for games. You can't really. I don't know how I'd be catering to any. Like for me personally, my situation. This is out of Guild Wars. I'm developing a startup company with a friend. It's a really small thing right now, but I couldn't, knowing as much as I know now after 1 year of working on that, I cannot imagine what it is like, especially in the gaming community right now, for a game as is Guild Wars 2, which has always kind of prided itself on breaking the walls, right, of the conventional. Like,
So you're saying like how to like create something new, and what are you getting at?
I'm literally in my own weird way kind of regurgitating what you said earlier with my own kind of words, but I'm adding that Guild Wars 2 has always been a game that's tried to break the walls, right? Like for instance, they didn't have anything to do with healers back in core days, right? They didn't want that trinity in there whatsoever. Then they changed their philosophy. And or like gear progression. They don't want that in the game, which I think it's the best thing ever. You can just log into PvP with a fresh account and play. That's insane. That's amazing, right? But it is a philosophy that requires trade-offs. And of course, when they're going for new philosophy, like new avenues of what they want to do, I'm thinking all of those variables from before. It's a giant mess, how to actually accompany everything. Like, if you're going to be a PvP player, of course you're not going to be satisfied with the amount of content, patch and balance wise, there's coming in. But at the same time, if you look at it, like you say, not from your own little world, kind of look at the big company picture with the whole game industry going on and everything. I think even Wooden Potatoes mentioned this in one of his videos watching a couple days ago. We should be kind of grateful for what we're getting in PvP, to be getting anything at all. I'm I'm kind of going on my own tangent here, but like,
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. Yeah, it is kind of like the players are expected to create their own content in a way. Like ArenaNet, ideally, they want to just create a world that we can create our own content in. That's like kind of why they create such repeatable things, right?
mhm.
It's not just like them being, trying to cut pennies here and say like, oh, the more we get them to log into the game, the more money we get because that's more options or more times that they go to the gem store. Yeah, they do definitely do that, but I think that Arena is one of the more, I'd say they're one of the more legit or less kind of like slimy companies for sure. I mean, look at Blizzard.
I I know I've only played Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. Outside of that,
Only do,
yeah,
do you
yeah,
ever play any other games?
no. Outside of that, Tekken and Burnout on PlayStation. That's about it. Ah, dude.
I played too many MMOs.
Well, as a matter of fact, I just bought a new computer last week. Cheers to me. My computer was so bad I couldn't play other games. So now I maybe am going to. Listen, Valen,
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you here too long. It's been 2 hours. It's really early in the morning for you. And I just have a question before we end this. I watched your videos. I was going through them, and I saw you play the drums on one of them.
Yeah.
You okay? I'm a musician as well. I play the guitar and the bass and anything with strings, basically.
Violin?
No, 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 not the violin. I'm self-taught guitarist. But I mean, I don't do any content on music, but I do have a couple of bands that I'm in, and I just want to know, like, what you're obviously open about this since you're putting up videos.
Yeah.
Are you planning to put up more videos, or
Yeah, I'm actually so I'm a jazz drummer and recently I think Chick Corea, one of my biggest influences actually died like maybe 2 weeks ago. So I was planning on doing a video. Like I could practice to like be decent enough. Like I don't practice drums enough to like be really good enough for people to be, well, I guess the average person who isn't a musician, but a musician will know I'm pretty rusty if I don't practice. So I got to practice. And then I'm looking to probably do a video on either some like chick songs, like I'll just do a cover, or some Pat Metheny because that's always just good.
Pat
I always like that.
Metheny is a guitarist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've listened to a lot of Pat Metheny actually, but quite some years ago. And you mentioned Chick Corea. That's what's that song called? Cherokee.
Spain. Oh, Cherokee. Yeah, he's probably done Cherokee before. I don't think he is known for that though. I think
I find that
someone
really
else has
interesting.
done that. Yeah.
Sorry.
But another thing is, one of my viewers is actually he's a drummer as well, and he's a professional drummer, and he doesn't really compose music, but he's trying to compose. And he's gonna create me a song, and I can. There's not gonna be like drums in it. I'll play the drums part, and then yeah, I'll probably do a video on his song. So he'll be like doing a song request.
Oh, that's so fucking awesome. Dude, you got a viewer writing you a song.
Yeah.
Dude. Sorry, that's just really cool interaction.
Yeah, so I definitely do plan on doing more music, even though not a lot. Like it's kind of demanding to practice.
It is, especially if you're a jazz drummer. I've actually got quite a few jazz drummers friends, one of whom went to Amsterdam to study last year. always every time that we would start playing, he'd just start with on the ride, every jazz drummer ever does that.
Yeah, I guess if you're more traditional jazz drummer, I like the more fusion style, which is kind of like rock and jazz.
Hmm.
So can be can be more diverse sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Well, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that, since music is definitely my biggest passion in life.
Yeah, I think music is really important, and like lately, I've been. It's kind of hard because you can't monetize videos with copyrighted music, right? So I can't use the music that I want to use. But if you look at my older videos, I'm using like all the like hip, copyrighted music. Nowadays, I'm using, it's kind of hard to find some good music, but there are definitely some places you can get it. And I try to always make kind of like music as a secondary to kind of like improve my videos. Like if there's like a moment where I want to show something, but I don't want there's nothing to say about it. Like I just want to show it. Then maybe I'll like increase the music here, and I'll like editing a video with music is kind of like being a music producer too, right? Because like I have to loop the music perfectly, time it so that like like the crescendo is happening when like like maybe I'm getting to like the conclusion here. It is kind of interesting, and I think in a lot of ways it is very artistic, right, to be a video editor.
For sure. That's a very, very new format as well. Only maybe a decade of really intense spotlight under the YouTube for basically anybody over the world. Like, you didn't see many video editors 10 years ago. Now there's many, many, many. I think.
mm, yeah, I think MTV is probably where that started, the music videos.
You think?
It's like yeah, I think music videos or MTV in general is a huge influence because it's like the first montages, right? Like the first montages.
True that. And the first kind of art, maybe. Kind of art direction they had. With the. I don't even know what's it called, but even stop motion sometimes and all that, right?
um yeah, I don't know what it's called.
All right. We've been going on for over 2 hours now, so maybe a final question from me for now would be, where do you plan on taking your content right now and in the future? And
Well, right now I'm just trying to cover all the bases. So if there's any question that needs to be answered, I'd like to have I have a video for that. Generally, I like to the content that I like to do is simply just where I talk about a topic and then there's like gameplay in the background. I don't really like to do like a build guide necessarily. It just kind of happened that build guides were really in demand, and um, there was a lot of content after the balance patch because alt builds were shaken up.
hmm.
So I am kind of known for doing builds, but honestly, I prefer more of like the discussion based or like the situational based where like I just commentate over a game. You'll see it very often in my videos. Like I'll do a topic and then I'll do by example by showing a match where that topic is shown.
Yeah,
Or like if I'm showing a build, I'll just add in a full match commentary into that video. So it's like you get two for one.
yeah. I mean, the quality is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Especially, I'm personally really, really grateful for anybody that's willing to go into the discussion aspect. So I find that really nice. I find that really good. So you're looking basically to cover all aspects of the game, at least PvP wise.
Yeah, PvP and World v World. I'm just looking to cover the aspects that are interesting to me, really. And then if something needs to be covered to support that, like if I'm gonna make a video about, how to become top 10 thief, well, how are they going to get to top, top 20? How are they going to get to top 100? They need to be able to progress from the beginning to the end. So yeah, it's all about accessibility, I guess. Like I consider myself, sometimes one of the more elitist players, and that's probably an issue too that I have is, maybe I'm a little too harsh on new players, but I try, like I'm um, kind of like the coach, right? The coach who's kind of like harsh on their kids
Hard love.
on the soccer team or whatever. It's like, yeah, he can be toxic sometimes, but he does it to help you. He does it to be constructive. I think an issue is that a lot of people in the community, they don't do it to be constructive. They do it to kind of like monopolize the competition, right? To ensure that they are the winners rather than promoting others from below them to get on their level so that they have competition. They stomp on everyone below them to kind of prevent them from getting higher. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say that it's kind of like what am I trying to say here? It's like they don't understand what they want. They're not like seeing they're not seeing
The full picture.
future.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
seeing what's right in front of them. They want to be the best right now, but if being the best right now means that it doesn't really mean anything to be the best because you're not really promoting a healthy community as you're talking about, then yeah, it's just not going to be as meaningful. So yeah, while I do have like, I want to be the best sometimes, I also admit that it's not really that meaningful to be the best if there's no competition. So I'm always trying to get people informed and on my level rather than to kind of like shut down people and say, oh, this isn't a viable play style. You are not playing my play style, therefore you're wrong. So I think it's maybe we're starting another topic here, but
I don't think it'd be too bad. Like, I know that you've got. I mean, we've been going for 2 hours, so even for the listeners, this is a bit long, but I think it's you were going the right direction there.
in terms of the discussion or in terms of how we should behave to new players.
Both, both. Like, the big thing I would like to tell the community, whoever would be listening to this, is pay attention. Like, people actually care about this game so much uh, that a person like you is taking into consideration all of that. Somebody that wants to be competitive and doesn't get that simple aspect of if put everybody down, then you're not really competing at all. What's
Big fish, small pond.
Yeah, it's not even a fish because it's just gonna dry up and die. And in a couple of days, there was no fish ever there, which is kind of what's happening to Guild Wars 2, right? On the flip side of that, you have people like you, fantastic content creators and very objective, very realistic people that are just trying to convey what they know in a very interesting way, I'd have to say, with these videos to the player base and creating competition, right? Like, even my personal goal with all this podcast and in-house leagues is, since of course, only to solidify some sort of knowledge to the player base, so that we can get a better player experience in PvP because it's so low, right?
Yeah, like you gotta. I mean, the in-houses are definitely necessary, but you also gotta have all the other stuff that I was talking about with the environment, the ecosystem, right? So it's definitely good to have those in-houses, but it's not the only requirement, of course.
For sure. Uh, okay, I'm gonna start asking a billion more questions. So, would you like to close it off here, or?
Sure, yeah. Do you need anything else?
Um, my mind's swelling with questions. I could be sitting here for hours now talking to you.
Go ahead. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe put a 10-minute on it.
Well, we could do a part 2. Why not?
Maybe later.
Maybe later, yeah. Maybe maybe episode whatever.
We'll see. You want to stop now
Yeah. Well, it's 2 hours and a half almost. So let's.
though? Yeah, maybe.
Um, I'm just going by the feeling here. But I kind of get really distracted really fast because sometimes I got a lot. Like
Yeah, I do too. I'm very scatterbrained.
yeah, scatterbrain. That's the expression. So trying to keep it concise and to the point is always a virtue when it comes to at
Yeah,
least.
that's not something that you get with me. I'm known for lengthy videos for sure.
Which is good. Like I've always been a giant fan of Wooden Potatoes. His videos are fucking long as fuck.
Well, yeah.
But I watch them to the end usually. As well as yours. Like you've got a lot of videos, which I do. Please, anybody listening still here, I do recommend great videos to check them out. Fantastic channel. As I've mentioned, you can see some drums on there, which is also great. I would like you're making me think I should add some guitar now on my channel.
I mean, you can't hurt.
Can't hurt, right? Like who doesn't like music at the end of the day?
Yeah, and it's always like your talking point. It's like your hobbies. Like you say, oh, you play music, and then yeah, from there, you can sort of maybe start another conversation. It's always a good talking point.
It's always yeah, true that. I'm just kind of quickly browsing through. I watched a video of yours on 3v3, and you saying your 2 cents basically on what do you think is it a good thing or a bad thing, or how the comps should be picked in the game, right? Because now we have another 3v3 season coming, or is it already here?
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing for the game. I think it's a great thing, like 3v3, but in the confines of these kind of play styles that we see now still being prominent, Burn Guard is going to be a big problem probably.
Yeah, Scourge is actually really popular now.
Oh,
threes.
Yeah, and the barrier from Scourge is going to be insane, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of like there's a lot of problems with it. I could go on another whole hour talking about problems of balance, but yeah, basically it favors builds that can do damage without like line of sight. So usually Necros, Guardians, and classes that need line of sight or like level terrain, because you can just like run up and down the terrain because the maps are so small and then filled with terrain at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's too favoring to like certain playstyles, and Scourge obviously just mashes AoEs around it, and you can't really have a choice to stand in them or not.
So you think that should be something to consider by ArenaNet, maybe to change, or
Yeah, I think the map sizes definitely could be looked at. I mean, they definitely did it to Capricorn before. They changed the map size.
oh yeah, true that.
So they could definitely do it, but yeah, I don't know how high on the list the 3v3 balance is, because they have this philosophy that, oh, we don't balance for 3v3, we balance for conquest. But why not? Why? Like, that's another issue. Is this is going back to the healthy environment. If there's not enough game modes to keep the player in the game, they're bored of just playing conquest, they're gonna leave. That's your talent.
Yeah, I mean, you think conquest can be boring? Like, can it get to that point?
Oh yeah, I love conquest, but sometimes it's nice to have variety.
For sure. Like ever since they implemented these 2v2s, 3v3s, it's a million times better as far as I'm concerned. It's great for the game.
Yeah, I think they just need to figure out that people don't want to play only threes or only conquest. They want a little bit of both.
Exactly. You think there's a problem with splitting the player base because it's so small there?
No, I don't think you're splitting the player base. You're just making it so that the people who don't like conquest leave when it's conquest, and the people who don't like 3v3 leave when it's 3v3, And the people who like both, they're going to be here anyways. And yeah, you'll split the player base a little bit, but you can already do unranked while 3v3 is out.
Hmm?
So that's already splitting them. You see some streamers just literally just play unranked. Like I normally will play only ranked when 3v3 season is out. If I'm not feeling like 3 queuing, I just want to solo queue, I'm not going to solo queue into 3v3. That sounds like a bad time. So I'm just going to play unranked. So I am splitting the player base anyways, and it's not that I want to do it, it's that I've been forced to do it. I am forced to go to unranked because I only want to play Conquest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a bad spot being put into in that sense as a player for sure. Actually, remembered that yesterday I pressed ranked with a thief. Suddenly was in the middle of a 3v3. Yeah. And like I changed right in time to Angie, but the enemy thief wasn't fortunate enough to, be able to switch or whatever. So they essentially just died like a couple seconds into it.
Yeah, Thief in 3s and 2s is pretty interesting. I made some builds for it, but yeah, not amazing.
It's really hard to. There's so much AoE cleave coming from everywhere. Like you even have the Corona discharge on Angie. That massacres fools. Like, you'll.
And no port spots.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean the maps. That's a really good point. They're so small. 3v3 is 6 players, right? Like we do 1v1s in those maps in King of the Hill. There's 4 more players.
Yeah.
Vallun, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I think we covered a lot for sure.
I always feel like there's so much more to cover, like or to go back and this and that. But this is also why I kind of love him, because this is the perfect way, it keeps you leaves you wanting for more. At least me, so kind of like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to talk about, sure, on these topics. Potentially good videos as well, video topics. I do want to get more into balance discussion, which is kind of it gets a lot of views because you got all the angry people saying, "Don't nerf my class, re."
For sure. All right. So to anybody still here, make sure to check out Vallun's videos. I will be doing so as well, especially if we're gonna talk about balance. If you're gonna do that, I'm gonna be checking it out for sure. You stream as well? How regularly?
I do have my stream schedule, which is Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, which is kind of weird. Like I stream right after raid reset, so like early Monday, and then Wednesday is like NA Prime, and then Friday is like right after World reset. So that's pretty much when I stream. Twitch.tv/Vallun, VALLUN.
Yes, and on YouTube, exactly the same, Vallun. You know how I remembered your name, even back in Heart of Thorns?
How?
Yes.
Don't say it, please. Don't. I know what you're gonna say.
No Vallun pass.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say like some drug that I'm not going to name.
Oh no, I don't know what you're talking about there, but
Oh, it's Valium.
I know.
Oh, okay. You baited me.
I didn't mean to, but I did see so much of no valid path, and it made me laugh so hard every time. Because there's literally no fucking valid path anywhere you look in the game, by the way. It's insane. Yeah, so anybody still listening, please check out Vallun. Great cornerstone and potential pillar of the community as well, if we keep losing players.
Well, thank you for having me. It was definitely a lot of fun. I wasn't even expecting it to go this long, but it did. So